Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage on a slightly overcast but above freezing January day. It's a Tuesday just before lunch and I'm headed up to the house to eat in a few, but before I get too carried away on this transmission build, you can see the case behind me. I hope it's black, kind of blends in. Of this transmission is going to have the Sonnax drum module. Right off the bat, you're thinking, why are you putting that nice module in an old case? Well, this old case and the Sonnax module make a nice unit. The design of the Sonnax drum module, in theory, they claim the weight is concentrated further in toward the center, so the RPM, if it was going to explode, would be much higher than you could probably reach with whatever engine you have. Of course, it still has to have a shield over it for drag racing. And that doesn't include the bell housing. A lot of people get confused about that. They think if they bolt the bell housing on, they're protected. No, this is for your flex plate explosion. You have to run an SFI flex plate. You have to cover your SFI flex plate. And of course, this converts a Cadillac bell housing case to a Chevy, so that works out as well too. But you still need to cover the body of the transmission always, unless you have an SFI case. Now, the Sonnax drum module in an SFI case is even better, I suppose, but I believe that drum module kind of reinvigorates the need for these old, wonderful, thick cases. And thick, this thing at its thinnest point, when I cut it off around the bell housing, is just under 300 thousandths. And it was in a Cadillac. It had an easy life, hauling some big old boat around, but it wasn't like in a Chevrolet getting, the heck beat out of it. Probably that Cadillac had an easy life. The transmission, while it was somewhat dirty, it's taken me a few days to prep it. I'm really fussy, as you know, but that's okay. So, a few highlights of the parts in no particular order. I've already installed the Russell -6 cool lines. I'm pointing like I hope you can see. And if you're really focused, you can see they have the copper washes to seal them to the case. The Turbo 400, most of them, 90-something%, are straight thread. So it's not pipe thread. A quick way to tell, if it's pipe thread, the fitting, you can still see threads even though it's tight. Straight thread is going to go all the way in like you're threading a bolt into a nut. And you need to seal it. And this, I was buying these Russell -6 fittings for the Turbo 400 case because they came with the washer. They used to come with a washer. Now they come with an O-ring. There's no room for an O-ring to seat in the case. I suppose you could counterbore the case, but otherwise it just gets randomly squished and it's probably going to leak. So this is one of my last few sets that I have with copper washers, and you can supply your own washers, take the O-rings off. You can continue to buy it. It's a quality fitting and they're not much money, but it kind of upsets me. 640520 is the part number then and now. So if you're lucky, you have the washers in the package. If not, you got to find your own. But General Motors, when you take the straight thread fittings out of the case, they seem to have some kind of, it looks like red Loctite, but red is a little bit probably too aggressive. So I do put 2 drops of blue Loctite on the threads. I mean, just a little bit. I don't want to, it doesn't need to be swimming in it. I'm not relying on it to seal, but it does hold it tight while you're taking fittings off and on. And never been an issue. They still come back out if you need to. So you don't have to put anything on the threads, but I like to think about every thread and what it needs. The back of the case is getting an ICT billet governor cover. There's nothing under the cover. It's going to be bolted to the case forever, probably, unless you take it off and drill and tap it for a drain or a vent or something. But for the most case, it's going to stay on the case. It's a nice unit, this piece of it, but in the package they gave you bolts that are actually shorter than what would have been in the tin cover from the factory. Combined with a gasket, if you choose to run one, which I do. When I put the bolt through that was supplied with the ICT billet cover, I have 2 threads showing tops. So I toss that, put in a slightly longer 3/4 bolt, and I have 3/8 thread sticking out. The hole in the case is 5/8 deep. So it's ridiculous to only try to use 2 threads of it. You're going to pull the threads out of the case. That's the little things that'll frustrate you and trip you up when you're going to put your transmission together. You know, it comes in a kit, you think it's okay, you got to scrutinize every part, unfortunately. During case prep, I have been bit by this before and forgot to do it, but this transmission is getting a heavy-duty intermediate snap ring and a case saver, which bolts in and rides right there and fills the void in the case. This case lugs all around, but this makes up for the lack of lugs. But you drive out the pin anchor for the front band that we're not going to have anymore, and you have a 3/8 bolt that has to go out through the case, and you're going to put a nut on the outside. Well, I'm pointing, but I'll show you later, I guess. The bolt is about 5 thousandths bigger. This is a press fit in the hole. So in theory, you could get this out through the case when you're trying to assemble it. Now I put sealer under the conical head, sealer on the bolt itself when it goes through the case, and usually enough squishes out to go under the head of the nut. But there's a lot of oil slinging around inside the transmission. I don't want to create a leak. I need this to be there, but I don't want it to leak. So it's one of the rare times you'll hear me say use silicone, but RTV. But in this case, I don't want a nuisance leak, because to fix this, you got to take the transmission apart, which means taking the bell housing off and everything. So not the end of the world, but let's avoid it by thinking ahead. But if you get it all siliconed up and go to put it in there and realize the bolt won't go through the hole, now you're trying to wind it through the hole and you're marring the aluminum, just take a 3/8 drill. It'll cuff the hole out for you, and now the bolt slides right in and out. And you'll be much happier when you go to assemble it. But if you forget to do that now, you're going to be sad. It's going to get the Sonnax no-walk rear case bushing, heavy-duty case bushing and bearing, it says. So it comes with the bearing with a step on it that has to be driven in from the inside. It won't clear. If you try to go in from the back, you're going to ruin the bushing. And I like that the bearing sits right over the bushing. The step they give you comes with shims to set your rear end plate. Nice little kit, whatever, $30. Well worth it. I'm just going over the parts that were, I didn't buy the parts, I'm just putting it all together. I supplied some of the stuff. A lot of the stuff was just mailed here. A stud kit for the pan, interesting. I actually like that idea, Sonnax. It's actually a Power Glide pan kit. It has 14 studs and nuts. Turbo 400 only needs 13, so when I lose one under the bench, as I mentioned, anytime I drop anything, it goes under the bench. Direct bounce. I could do it 10 times in a row. I should do that on camera. It'll go under the bench every time. It seems anyway. Adjustable rear servo pin for the rear band. Not always needed, but handy to have. I'll use it because I have it. It'll allow me to put the band exactly where I want it. This transmission, the hard parts, again, I bought an empty case, and I have parts behind you. Again, I always point like you're standing here, but behind you I have a whole rack of parts. I need to come up with a lower unit, and the intermediate stuff I've already dug out, and a pump, and miscellaneous parking pole and the parking linkage and all that stuff. But a lot of the stuff's getting replaced with the Sonnax drum module from the intermediate clutches forward. Let's talk about them while I'm right here. I've chosen to use the 4L80E 4-clutch setup with the 4L80E pressure plate, 370 thousandths thick. Most likely, after I assemble the lower unit with the center support, stack the clutches in there, apply it a few times with air up through the center support bolt hole in the middle of it. That's when I determine, I got a good feel when I put it in for clutch clearance. I like to go by feel. It's around 40 to 50 thousandths. 4-clutch, I know the rule's 10 thousandths, so minimum be 40. 50 to 60 is probably just about right for this, but I want to apply it a few times and then make my final determination. It's very likely I'll need to substitute one of the 4L80E steels. In this case, the 4L80E intermediate clutches, they're both about 72 thousandths, both the clutch and the steel. And the Turbo 400 is about 99 thousandths thick, so I can make up some clearance easily or subtract it by swapping the steels around. That's why it's handy to have piles of each. The extra thick snap ring actually came as a CK Performance valve body kit that was mailed to me and I'm going to install. So back to the lower unit. It's getting a Sonnax main shaft. Always a good idea. Again, the input shaft, you have to choose, it's like 4 of them to choose from. When you buy the drum module, but unrelated, but still from Sonnax, is the main shaft. So the lower unit will be plenty strong. The output shafts are very, very strong. You can buy an aftermarket one if you want, but when you break that, you should hang it on the wall. You should be proud of yourself, the stock one, because it's a pretty stout rig. So it will have a stock output shaft, and the main shaft and input shaft will be super duty. Hang on. Sorry about that. I could hear an engine running in the driveway. It's the UPS guy dropping off a package. Always exciting. You know, out here in the woods, you don't get a lot of activity, so sometimes I like to, you know, shoot the breeze with the UPS guy. He used to live next door. Kind of funny. So over here at the case, the Russell fittings, I like them because the nut portion of it where you tighten it is really wide, and some of the ones you buy, you know, you got a very thin nut. It's hard to keep the socket on it. Even I use a 3/4 6-point socket to tighten them up. Goes pretty well. I've drilled and tapped. This was a metal vent transmission, so I took that out. 1/8 inch pipe, DOT, straight connector airline, all the normal stuff we do. This particular case is really nice once I got all the dirt. It came from the Midwest. Got all the dirt, and there was some kind of either undercoating or sealer or something around, like splashed around this side of the transmission, which underneath was nice, but getting it off, not so much. I don't even want to tell you how much time I have in prep work to get the case this far. Being fussy, it pays off, you know. And assembly, I will definitely highlight mostly the Sonnax drum module. First time I've ever done it. I can tell you right off the bat, Sonnax themselves have about a 20-minute video where their technician, who obviously knows all you need to know about it, assembles it in front of you. That video is very detailed and in-depth. My video will probably contain my experience assembling and installing the whole thing and any snags I might run into. And I'll probably be a few days assembling the transmission, so the video will be following that. And that's that, I guess. Now the fun begins. It takes a lot of work to get to this point. Always exciting when you just pretty much get to assemble stuff. I still have to rebuild a pump, and I got to go dig out a lower unit and clean all that up. So I guess I'm not done. You're never done cleaning parts. It never ends. Have a good day.